jazz is not the only kind of music that I like to play, but it is a big part of what I do and what I study and what I'm into. And chances are, if you are subscribed to this channel, you are subscribed, right? Okay. If you're here, then you're probably also interested in jazz and studying it. And the thing is, it's just so vast. There's lots of music, of course. There's lots and lots of recordings of jazz, and there's also lots of ways of looking at it, lots of ways of teaching it. When I went to music school many years ago, I studied. The school I went to was called the Dick Grove School of Music, and Dick had a very particular way of organizing harmony and looking at music. Other teachers that I studied with also had very, particular ways that they looked at music and taught music. And there's no one way that's right. I think the best thing you could do is study with different teachers and learn what you can. Recently, I've been really fascinated by the teachings of Barry Harris. He was a pianist, a jazz bebop pianist, and made some incredible records. But I think these days is thought of more as a teacher because the later years of his life he did lots of teaching, lectures and workshops and such for many years. And lots of people who are playing music today either studied with him directly in these workshops or have studied his teachings. A lot of his lectures and workshops are on YouTube, so you can learn that way. And of course, the way YouTube works, once I started watching some of his videos, I started getting recommended other stuff in the Barry Harris universe, and especially guitar players kind of decoding Barry's teachings for the guitar. Jens Larsen has made some videos talking about studying with Barry Harris, which he did. Also, Thomas Echols has made loads of videos about Barry's whole system of music, of harmony and melody. And Chris Parks is another great guitar player who's made loads of videos based on the teachings of Barry Harris. So I thought it would be interesting for you all and for me to have some conversations with those guys, with Jens Larsen and Chris Parks and Tom Echols, about Barry's teachings and what their takeaways are. So that's the video that you are about to see. So I hope you will enjoy it. I got so much out of these conversations. My head is still kind of spinning in a good way. Just so much inspiration, new sounds, fresh ideas. So without further ado, here are my conversations with Chris Parks, Jens Larsen, and Thomas Echols. But I do appreciate, like, in your teachings, like how often you use words like pretty and beautiful, talking about these sounds. And I don't hear words like that nearly enough in the jazz education space. So I really appreciate that about you.
Oh, great. Yeah. Well, it's that and, not a big vocabulary. But I'll tell you what, Barry used to say that all the time. Barry used to say it all the time. And you know what word he didn't use a lot? Swinging. You know how like everybody's like, oh, that's so swinging, or that's so swinging. That's like one of those words that doesn't really mean anything because it means something totally different to you, Right. You know when whatever band you're playing with at the time or whatever session you're on, no matter what kind of music you're playing, that band is swinging. That could be swinging because it's just like a feeling. Like, oh, it feels really good. So that doesn't even really mean anything anymore. I don't quite know what people mean by swinging.
Right. Yeah. Right. In some, I guess, in some camps, it has to do with some metric subdivision, but the way people use it now, it's kind of means like, yeah, it means cool or happening or whatever. But it's I can see where somebody like Barry Harris would just not have time for a word like that.
Yeah, right. He would just say somebody sounded good. He'd say, "Oh man, he sounded so good." That's it. That's the
Yeah.
highest praise you'll ever get, you know?
Well, well, I wanted to ask you, when did you first meet Barry?
93 was my first lesson.
Uh-huh.
So you live in the city, right? Do you live in
Hmm.
Manhattan? Okay, so on 48th Street used to be all those music stores.
Right.
So he would be in, Rod Baltimore's Woodwinds and Brass store is there also. So at
Right.
6 o'clock, all the stores close, and then he would take over Rod Baltimore's, and it would
Hmm.
be like from 6 o'clock till, well, like midnight, but it used to go past that sometimes, and it would be Mondays and Tuesdays. So that was when his
Wow.
class was when I first met him. But that's after the Jazz Cultural Theater. See, I didn't know him then during that period.
Uh-huh.
By the time I met him, he had already had a stroke.
Oh, right. That was right. That was
Yeah,
around that time.
he had just finished recovering from his stroke.
Oh, wow. What was your experience in jazz education prior to meeting Barry Harris?
In jazz education, really none,
Hmm.
zero. The only thing I knew was that I took a course my first year of college, which I
Hmm.
didn't finish, but I took a course my first year of college, which was like Introduction to Jazz, which was a really, I was like, well, I know music. This is be easy. And on it, they gave us these CDs, and one of them was a CD that had all the different eras of music, and one of them had Charlie Parker playing "Embraceable You," which was just from the dial recordings, and it was just amazing. And I remember listening to it, and then the professor said, "And then this is his second take." So he did this fantastic solo, and then right after he played a second take, which was totally different.
Huh.
Every note was different.
Huh.
How he started, how the middle, everything was different. So I'm sitting there with exactly the look that you have on your face. I'm like, is that possible? How is that even possible? And then I was thinking to myself, like, I don't even know where one of those notes is on my guitar. Not even one. And I know we're playing the same Western scale. I know it. I
Right.
was like,
Right.
I'm listening. I'm like, I don't hear my pentatonic minor in that, in whatever that is that he's doing. But that got me hooked.
Hmm.
And then a friend of mine was also a guitar player. We met this guitar player named Ronnie Ben-Hur, who was teaching in Brooklyn Conservatory of Music. Very good jazz guitarist. And at the time, he was a student at Barry's at the Jazz Cultural Theater. And at this point, he was already playing with Barry. Barry had a sextet that he would play with from time to time. And so the first lesson with him I had, he said, if you really love this music like this, you need to study with Barry. So first of all, what a beautiful thing for him to do, because how many
Yeah.
people would do that? They
Right.
keep all their students for themselves. They try to make students feel like, they're the king or whatever.
Yeah.
But he right away was like, oh man, you should study with Barry. So I started studying with him right away. It was awesome,
Wow.
obviously.
Wow. And I mean, there's his concepts. I never got to study with him, and I deeply regret that I never went to hear any of his workshops. I certainly could have, and I just didn't. But so I'm learning about them from you and from Thomas Echols, and there's names for things that I haven't heard in other uh, systems, and it's a very it's a deep system, and I wonder when you in your time with Barry, was there any particular concept that you had a hard time squaring with what you knew or what you thought you knew?
Well, the thing is, I didn't know all that much. I thought I did, but I didn't know all that much before. I knew the modes because I played rock music, so I knew the modes. But that didn't have any, that had no bearing on what he was talking about. He never talked about modes, so that was
Right.
out. That
Right.
was out. So it was basically from scratch.
Hmm.
So that's why it was easier. But there are people that come, where I'm teaching now over at Open Studio. There's a lot of people that do that. They have a background. They went to Berkeley for 4 years, and they have a certain way of looking at things. So I try to not, like, it's impossible to say, well, forget what you know and just think about it in this way now. I just try to explain the language because it makes it easier when talking about it. Like, just for instance, an arpeggio in Barry's world is not the same thing as an arpeggio that you normally hear. So if we had like a G7, G B D F, that's, most people call that an arpeggio. Oh, he's playing an arpeggio. But see, that's a chord for Barry. That's going up a chord. An arpeggio would be G B D, which is the triad, but then you repeat the bottom note on top. G B D G. That's an arpeggio. See? It's almost like a classical way to look at it. So those little things, like in his language, are what's different. There's a couple of things there that are different, He has a few ways of describing things, but then there are other things that are similar. So I try not to focus on it too much, all of it was hard for me. I'm not a particularly good learner. I'm not a great student. It took me a long time to get it. But the thing is, the stuff was so good. I was like, what else am I going to do? Am I just going to go to some other form of teacher? I'll go to this teacher. And, I was living in New York. I could have gone to anybody. There were so many great players.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But once you hear something that really gets you, you're like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like, that's really it. This is the right. I just knew it, that this was the right place. And he really liked guitar players. He used to say, "Oh, the sixth diminished it's really meant for guitar. Really, you all should be the best ones at it." I was like, "Oh my God, what kind of pressure is that? Jeez, now I really have to learn it."
That's funny. What do you think he meant by that? Why is it so guitar? Why is it so guitar? Why is it such a guitar concept?
I don't know, but once he said that, it made it so that I said, "Oh, okay, I really have to get this together." Now, this is the one thing I have kind of a pet peeve about, and that's the majority of people on the YouTube that talk about Barry. They'll say, "Oh, Barry Harris, he's a sixth diminished guy, or he's the major bebop scale guy, or something like that." He just renamed it something different. It's really so off the mark, because actually, so Barry's classes used to be separated in 3 classes. First, he would have the piano class, which was like the harmony. That's where really he would talk about his scales of chords, like major 6 diminished, minor 6 diminished, dominant 7 diminished, dominant 7 flat 5 diminished. Then would be the singers class. So a whole bunch of singers would be there, like 50 or 60. And he would take a standard, they'd sing it, and we'd sing it in like 6 different keys. And then every singer waited on a line in their key. Like, okay, all the G's here, all the A flats here, all the B flats here. And if you were in the rhythm section or just wanted to join the rhythm section, you could learn that standard in all those different keys. Even if you're struggling through it, it was a perfect way to, like, really get it.
Yeah.
So after 2.5 hours of hearing that one song, it was you had to get it. You were at least a little better at it,
Yeah.
And then after the singers class was the horn class, where he would talk about improvisation single notes. Now, his harmonic concepts of his 4 scales of chords is how he sees harmony, but his single note concepts are almost entirely different. There is a little bit of overlap, but he uses regular 7-note scales a lot of the times for those things, like just a dominant scale or just a major scale. And so he had this just all-inclusive philosophy about how he played and how music was. So to say, like, oh, he's the major bebop scale guy, or he's just the 6th diminished guy is too small. We can't say that. We can't say that about, it was this brilliant person who had all these different beautiful ways to look at things. So there were some times that I couldn't make the harmony class and the singers class, and I would just go to the horn class. And that's the other thing. Once you got in, you could stay all night if you wanted. You paid once. And I think at the time, Adam, it was $7. Can you imagine? $7.
No, I can't imagine that.
Incredible. It was
That's
incredible.
wow.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Barry's insights, if you look around at like his contemporaries on the piano, like Tommy Flanagan, I would think of as a contemporary, or Ahmad Jamal, or people born around the same time who came up in jazz. Was anybody else looking at the music like Barry did, or was his vision singular?
Yeah, as far as I know, I think it was singular, but I would never say that because I have never really taken a deep dive into Tommy Flanagan or Ahmad Jamal or anybody like that. So I'm sure there's elements of it there. I mean, you could hear elements of it in Nat King Cole when he plays. I mean,
100%.
there's a bunch of elements. There's really a lot of elements in gypsy jazz guitar too, if you really hear it. There's a
Yeah,
lot of beautiful things with gypsy jazz guitar that are similar.
right.
Similar. Now the thing is, and you know what's funny, man? Pat Martino had an interesting philosophy. Pat Martino, beautiful guitar player, had uh, um, he talked about some similar things that Barry did. But the thing is, Barry goes into a slightly different direction than he does, slightly different. So he had a similar way of talking about it. But I don't. To be fair, I don't really know. I never really checked out the obviously those great artists. I never really checked them out in the same way I checked out Barry stuff.
Right.
Never. But as far as I can hear, his concept of, especially his harmony of using the scales of chords and borrowing notes and moving contrary motion, all those beautiful things, I don't hear it that much in a lot of other people.
Right.
And the thing that was so Barry had a lot of tunes that he liked to play. First of all, when you went to hear him play at the Vanguard or something, because he liked to play at the Vanguard. So, and that was nice because that was just trio. And there was something special about hearing Barry just trio, even though it's nice to hear him accompany a guitar player or a trombone player or a saxophone player. It was really nice to hear him trio because he could really stretch out. And he would play a lot. You'd hear him, if you went to a Barry concert, you would hear Bud Powell, Monk, Bird, Standards. That's it. That is it. I mean, that's what you'd hear. You'd hear Bud Powell tunes, you'd hear Charlie Parker tunes, you'd hear Thelonious Monk tunes, and that's it. He wouldn't even play his own tunes.
Wow.
You know how many times there's this great pianist named Mfergu. He used to say, "Man, why don't you play your own tunes? All these other pianists play their own tunes." He didn't even acknowledge it. And he wrote some beautiful tunes. He wrote beautiful songs, but he just didn't play them. He felt like our music, when you went to hear our music, that's what you should hear. Just like if you went to a classical concert, you should hear some Chopin, you should hear some Bach, you should hear Monk, you should hear Bud Powell. And see, he also believed like he didn't want to give you a reharmonized version of Monk. Like, can you imagine such a thing to say like I'm going to take this genius but I know some better chords. That's awesome.
Right.
That's awesome. But so that's what he would play. But anyway, so there was one particular ballad that he loved to play. It's called "I'll Keep Loving You," and in that, it's Bud Powell's tune. And in that, I mean, I must have heard Barry play that tune 1,000 times, and every time it was different with all these beautiful new nuggets of things in it. It was just like, it was unbelievable. So when you went to hear him, you're like, oh, I'm really experiencing something in the moment that's new. This idea that he's trying out, or this thought that he has right now. And I'm experiencing it right now, in this moment. It'll never be done again. It's never been done before. And I get to be here for it. So I'm listening to this genius with his thoughts right now, whatever his thoughts are right now. And they were always like, I don't know, his everything about his playing I loved, his sense of aesthetics, even after the stroke. even after the stroke. You would think his left hand would be a little bit of a drag. It really wasn't. He figured out a way to do a little less with it, and he just molded it right into his playing, his vision of what music should sound like. But,
Wow.
yeah.
I wanted to ask you in there, you mentioned borrowing, and that's something I've heard you and also Thomas mention in passing in some of your videos, but
Yeah.
I haven't sought out like where is a video that's specifically about borrowing. So is it something that's fairly straightforward and easy to explain?
Very straightforward. Yeah.
Okay.
Grab your guitar, man. You got your guitar behind you. Is that a Collings, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I have a Collings. I have an I-35. They're like what would be considered their answer to the 335. And it's awesome. I love it. It's not the laminate. It's the real carved one. It's beautiful. I love that. That's my electric. But now look at this one, man. Have you seen this? Look. I have this. Now I have this.
Oh, wow.
This is my 1935 Gibson L5. You know who used to own this? Ry Cooter.
No.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
And he kept it pristine, man.
It looks
He
so
kept
clean.
it. Yeah, it's so clean. It's beautiful. I love this guitar. Anyway, I overpaid
Wow.
for it. My wife's gonna kill me for this guitar.
I won't tell.
So if you take, this is a very basic chord. This A minor 7. Play this A minor 7. Yeah. So now that is not a chord. Nothing we play is a chord. That is 4 notes that belongs to a scale.
Okay.
The scale that belongs to is C6 diminished scale. So it belongs to this scale, which then gives us this. If you make the chords for that, it gives you a 6 chord, it gives you a diminished chord, and so on. Instead of giving us the normal this, which is great also. That's great, but that's diatonic. So diatonically, this, because you have that extra note, gives you all these beautiful chords. So it gives you a series. Yeah. Yeah, take that one and move it up here. Move it up here. Yeah, and then diminished. Another 6. Another diminished. And another 6. Okay. Now what's beautiful about, let's take this chord. A minor 7. Let's say we're playing a 1-6-2-5 in G. So you got G major. Go ahead. G major. To E minor. Yeah, now A minor 7. So you play that chord. Good. Now D7. You know what D7 I want you to do for this one? Do this one. No, not even a D in it. I love that one. That's a pretty
okay.
one. So now watch. So now we got G major to E minor 7. Now A minor. Now you could do something like this. Look. Do it. Beautiful, man. Now do it in time. Do it in time. So start off with G, go to E minor, and then do that on the A. Yeah, beautiful, man. Now that's just moving the scale parallel, right? But then you have this idea of borrowing, which is this. So you got a 6 chord here, you got a diminished above it and a diminished below it, okay? So any one of those notes I can borrow. For instance, you've played this chord a million times. What would you call that chord?
A minor 9.
A minor 9 or C major 7. Right, exactly. Barry would call that C6 with 1 borrowed note. The B is borrowed from the diminished.
From the off. Oh, you're borrowing.
Exactly. Right, that's what Thomas calls it. Thomas calls it the off chord.
Right. So
So the C6 would be the on chord. The diminished would be the off chord. Right, so look, I could do the... So now I'm going to give an example. I'll do the 1-6-2-5 again. And now here we go. So I borrowed it and I gave it back. Do that. Blee-doo-da. Pretty move, right? So that's borrowing. That's borrowing.
Oh, wow.
Now, You could also, you don't have to just borrow one note. You could borrow more than one note. So for instance, what if I borrowed, for the G, if I borrowed the A flat also? Play this chord. Now you would call that chord like an A minor major 7 with a 9 or something like that. Or even C major 7 with a raised 5. Some people would call it. Barry would call that C6 with 2 borrowed notes.
Huh. Borrowed from.
Borrowed from the diminished, you see? Wow. So now you're like, oh wait, because when you borrow, it right away creates this tension. You see?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you release the tension. So even here's G major. And you say, you see how pretty that is, man? And it's now the hip thing is we're focusing just on that A minor 7. But see, all of these chords belong to scales. The G major to E minor 7, that all belongs to G major 6. So that means I can do the same thing for G. See, look, here's borrowing. I mean, come on, man. There are so many beautiful things about it. It readjusts your thinking about harmony in such a beautiful way. It's awesome. Now, a guy like Thomas Echols, for instance, you know, he never spent 1 minute in a room with Barry Harris, but he got it. He understands it. So he wrote me, this is maybe 6 years ago, I get an email from this guy who I've never heard of. He's like, hey, I was interested in the Barry Harris stuff. I've been studying it for 10 years. So he sends me a little video. He's like, I'm thinking about starting a channel. He sends me a little video. And that turned out to be like his first Labyrinth video, which is like 30 minutes long. Absolutely brilliant. So I watched like 3 minutes of it. I was like, oh my God, I got to get in touch with this guy. So I emailed him back and then we started a friendship back and forth. But he comes from a totally different, I mean, he's classically trained. He's, you know, like, I mean, you hear his playing. He's wonderful, you know, has beautiful sound and everything. But he really checked out the Barry thing. And he has a couple of ways of looking at how Barry used to have the pianist do certain things that made it crystal clear for us as guitar players. So he's really the one for me. Like, in terms of looking at harmony, he's checked it out. He's really checked it out, you know. But yeah, the concept of borrowing is not that hard.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. You just, you all of a sudden are creating different things. You know, you ever hear him do this exercise? That's all it is. Look, you're borrowing. So here's C6, right?
Yeah.
He's right. But instead of doing, this is the way I do it. I leave out the D string.
Okay.
Okay, so if you just play those 3 notes, that now if you just do this up the scale, up the 6th diminished, that's pretty. Now watch. But then if you add the borrowing note above it, so for the A, I'm going to borrow the B. Next one. Now I'm going to borrow the C. Next one. Now those look normal for diatonic. Now here's where it changes. Now you got to diminish. But you have that. Yeah. You know how pretty that is, man? Now this next one. So this would be C6. So here's the normal. Here's the normal. Yeah, so now you have to borrow the F for the E.
Oh. Right.
Yeah, pretty. Now watch this one, man. Look at this one. You hear that? Right. Yes. And then this one, listen. Yes. Yes, wow. Exactly. So, you know, in all the videos, he's doing them diatonically. So he's doing them like if you did them just up a major scale, they're really pretty too.
Yeah.
But see, if you do 6 diminished, then you get this pretty stuff. I love that, man. I love that. So anyway, there's so much stuff to it. Adam, I can't even tell you. It's like going down a rabbit hole of. But the thing is, even if you learn 1 or 2 things from it,
Yeah.
It's beautiful, you know, and you can use it. It's not like you have to know everything about it. It's first of all, it's impossible to know everything about it.
Yeah.
But you just grab a couple of things and you're like, oh. So, okay, take D7 scale, right? So here's how you practice scale. You practice the scale up to the 7th and back down. So like D mixolydian, right? Now thirds. Yeah, but you got to do a third from every one.
Oh.
You got to do a third from every one. Keep going. Yep. And now start on the top and come down. Dee-doo, dee-doo. Now, by the way, my first lesson, I was already done. At that point, I was done already. But anyway, so now you do triads. Dee-doo-da, dee-doo-da, dee-doo.
Well, I guess you
Yeah, that's right. Keep going. No, keep going. Go. You have to do a triad from each one. Now start on there and come down. Dee-doo-doo, dee-doo-doo. Now you do what he calls, what most people call arpeggio, but we do what we call a chord. Baba-doo-bee. No, that's an arpeggio in Barry's. So we call it a chord. Baba-doo-bee. Yeah, go ahead. Yep. Yeah, one more. Baba-doo-bee. One more. Now start there and come down. Beeba-dee-ba-dee-ba-dee.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. And then he would
too
say,
much.
"You're thinking too much." And then he would say, "Let's say, do the top one again, Baba-doo-bee from the D on the G string." Yeah. Okay. Now that's got 4 notes to it: D, F sharp, A, C. Then you have to learn how to pivot that. So in Barry's world, the pivot is you take the D, you play the D exactly where you played it, but then you play the F sharp, A, and C an octave lower. Beep-a-doo-bee. So you could look at a pivot like this. It's that, or it's taking a note, going down a sixth, and coming up a triad. That's also a way you could look at it. Beep-a-doo-bee. Do it.
I see.
Now,
Down the
yeah.
6th and up. Yeah.
Yeah. Now do the one from C. Do the chord up just so that you hear the sound. Baba-doo-bee. Now gotta say Baba-doo-bee. No, start on the C, the same place, yeah. And now you need to grab the E an octave lower. Come up a triad. Yeah, exactly. Bop-a-doo-bee. Yeah, you see? That's a pivot. So you have to be able to pivot from every degree. That's a pivot. So that's another one of his language things. So let's say I start on the F sharp. Start on the F sharp on the B string. On the B string. Yeah, just the note F sharp. Just F sharp. Yeah, start with your third finger. Watch. And play. Just come down the scale. Be-da. And then put a half step between D and C on the way down. Be-ba-dee-boo-da. Perfect. You got it? Be-ba-dee-boo-da. Now, when you get down to that C, come up a chord. Come up the chord. Be-ba-dee-ba-doo-ba-doo-bee. Beautiful.
Wow.
Now, instead of doing that, pivot it. Be-ba-dee-ba-dee-ba-doo-bee. Yeah, and maybe come down the scale to the third. Be-ba-doo-ba-dee-ba-doo-bee-dee-boo-da. Yeah, isn't that pretty?
Wow.
Be-ba-dee-ba-dee-ba-doo-bee-dee-boo-da. And maybe when you get down to that third, come up and diminish. Ba-ba-doo-bee. Or diminish. Ba-ba-doo-ee. Yeah, that's pretty. So watch. Be-ba-dee-ba-dee-ba-doo-bee-dee-ba-doo-bee-doo-bee.
Sorry.
That's okay. Pivot. Yes, and then maybe play 5-4-3 of G. Ba-ba-doo-bee-dee-boo-da. Beautiful phrase. So watch.
Wow.
Watch. Watch. If you said watch, 1, 2, 8. See, that's over A minor to D7, and we're just thinking D7. You see, there's no A minor like, oh, we can only start on certain notes. So now we got, or that's beautiful, man. What if we put a 16-note triplet on the first note? Now all of a sudden it's starting to sound like the language.
Right.
You see?
Yeah.
That's not you like grabbing a Charlie Parker phrase. That's you creating something from out of nothing. You see? Because you know a couple of things and you put them together.
Right.
It's so hip, man. I can't even tell you. There's a million things like that. Now that's his single note concept. So you see why I mean, like, it's two totally different things.
Right.
But equally brilliant. I mean, it's so good, man. It's so many good things to it, you know? But anyway.
Wow. So much. It's just all pure gold.
It's awesome. I'm telling you. I'm telling you, man. I wish I could take credit for it, as if like it's something that. But the thing is, for a person like I said before, for a person like me who's not particularly fast at picking things up, I'm shocked that more people didn't go to this. I'm shocked that more people didn't find this easier than like labeling everything. Oh, we're gonna play the Egyptian minor now, and then we're gonna. Forget about that. That's too hard for me. So that's the way I always try to put it. If somebody says, "Oh, well, what about this or what about this?" I always say, "Man, that's too hard for me. I can't. I can't even play D7 yet. I'm still trying to get D7 in my fingers."
Well, yeah. I mean, there's clearly a whole universe here, and you don't have to look any further. And yeah, I think for me, it's just just being open to it, because I mean, I didn't go to Berkeley, but I went to a music school a long time ago that was called the Dick Grove School of Music. It was in LA. And Dick had a system. And so a lot of what I learned was via his framework, and then over the years have learned other things from other teachers, and this is just a whole new way of talking about it. But as soon as I hear it, I know these sounds, like they're very dear to my heart, but I didn't have language around some of it, and I didn't see all the connections of things. So it's great, really great.
See, the thing is, I look at it as it's these little pieces, right? That as you learn each one, you can try to use them in your playing more. And then it's like where I put the little pieces in what order, and what order you put the pieces is going to always be different. Will never be the same. So you and I can know the same things on D7, let's say, but we'll never play the same type of phrases because we put them in different order. You put a pivot in a different spot. Maybe you put a pivot starting on the and of a beat instead of on the beat. There's a million variations. But it's still those little pieces that you're putting together. So when you hear, see the thing, I remember a big thing for me is once I learned a bunch of these little pieces, right? I said to myself, now when Barry talks about the bigger stuff, I got it. I got it now. But the thing was, there was never any bigger stuff. The bigger stuff is just the smaller things put together. So if you listen to a 4-bar Charlie Parker phrase, it was several of these little things put together. So I was like, okay, I misunderstood. I thought there was going to be a larger thing that we're building towards. There is no larger thing. That's what makes it even more brilliant. Like, oh yeah. So now if you transcribe Bud Powell, who maybe didn't think of it quite the same way, but this breaks the language up in such a nice way that you're like, oh yeah, I hear it. Okay, I got it. Oh, I'm listening to Fats Navarro. Oh, he does the same thing. And even John Coltrane earlier in his career, same thing.
Sure.
He does the same thing.
When did you first meet Barry Harris?
So at the time, so this is back in 1997. and I was just sort of getting started playing jazz, and I was trying to get into the conservatory in Copenhagen, and I was studying at this preparatory school, and some of the teachers there were educated in The Hague at the conservatory in the Netherlands. And Barry was there every year for a week for, I don't know how long actually, it's quite a long period, I think for like 15 or 16 years. And they were going back to the school for this Barry Harris week because there were people coming that they knew. There were also people, he always brings people also from New York and from, he draws people in from Italy and Spain. So there's like this whole community that was getting together in The Hague. And they were a part of that. So they just said, well, you guys are playing jazz. It was me and my roommate. You guys are playing jazz. You need to go here. That's just go get a plane ticket and then go. So that was kind of how we ended up there. And we had no idea what we were really getting into. We could probably play a few songs and stuff, but for the rest, this was at the time where for me, I was still just learning songs and playing in the street and trying to figure out anything about jazz that I could. So that was kind of how I was introduced to it. And then you end up in this community of people that are all super focused, and Barry is there explaining how to play solos. His master classes are him writing examples mostly. So in The Hague he had essentially two master classes, at least the two that I attended. One was like a soloing class, which was pretty much for everybody, mostly like horns, and then there was in the evening he would have a piano master class. Those are the two that I would go to, and then he will when he was there, he was just singing and explaining a solo, making it up as he went along, just picking a song and just constructing this bebop theme, still having the overview to remember the whole thing and sing the whole thing, and then teach it to us while also teaching us all sorts of exercises, but everything was just him explaining and singing, so it was like heavy to follow for a beginner like me. I was really working hard, plus that I was playing my Stratocaster, so I couldn't hear what I was doing half the time. Nobody could hear what I was doing anyway. It was probably better. And so that was sort of how I was introduced to it. I didn't really talk to him, but there were some guitar players there. I believe you're talking to Chris Parks also. I know he was there, but I didn't really talk to him at the time. He was there the first year that I was there as well. And then there were, and I forget what he's called. There was another guitar player that I took some lessons with as well, just to get sort of introduced to a lot of things, among other things than drop two voicings. But the stuff, so this was just for a very sort of intense week, right? Where we were there and we were just every day trying to sit there and learn solos on a blues and B flat and Cherokee and stuff like that. It was like really just really core bebop stuff. And it really resonated with me. And for me, it was like a dream come true. I was trying to get into the conservatory, and that was like I had complete tunnel vision. Like I just want to have an education in guitar, and I only want to play jazz, really. So in Copenhagen, would have to have a much more broader education. So this concept of just being in a place where I was just only bebop, was just like the records that I was listening to, that was just amazing. I was completely sold on that. And that was also, of course, those workshops were also why I ended up studying in The Hague, because I found out, okay, if I go here to study, I only have to play jazz, and they're all about bebop. And then also, of course, I had met teachers that were trained there as well. So
I see. Huh. You said like there was this whole community there, and there were some other guitar players. When I was young, I studied for a little bit with Ted Green, and sometimes I'll meet somebody else, and you can almost hear it. I have a friend who calls it the like secret handshake or something. Like if you meet somebody who spent some time with Ted, there's some of that is still in there playing. Do you feel that way about Barry's teaching? Like, can you hear in somebody's playing if they spent some time with him and his teachings?
No, not really. But I also think there are a lot. I think, yeah. So the people that I know, like I know Chris, but I actually know him more as a teacher than I've heard him play. Mm-hmm. And uh, there are quite a few people in The Hague that studied a lot with Barry, but they also have other influences that you can sort of so in that way I don't really hear it that specifically. I think the only one that I really think where the only one where I really thought about it without knowing was Pascal Grasso. Right. So that, like when I heard him play, I was like, okay, that's 6 diminished stuff that's coming out of there. He's either only doing bebop or he studied with Barry, and he did study with Barry. That was one where you can really hear it, I think. But for the rest, no, not in that way.
Yeah.
But maybe that's also, I mean, that's also worth pointing out that I think if you're talking to somebody like Chris, who was doing lessons with him, I imagine weekly for years, and then I was exposed to this for a week, a year, for 2 or 3 years, and then that was it. So it had a huge impact on me, but it was it was not in that way defining everything I did in that sense, because I was also having lessons with a bunch of other people who were just really different from that. They were not in that style at all. I mean, actually, I think some of them don't even like Barry Harris and his playing. So
Right. And was it like his concepts? Obviously, every school, every teacher has their system or their, whatever. So if you go to Berkeley, maybe you have a certain perspective on how it all works. Or I went to Dick Grove School of Music, and that really had a system. So for you, who was, just like seeing Barry once a week, or I mean, sorry, for a week, and then not again till a year later, because his concepts were so particular, was there one of them that you found difficult to square with other things you were learning?
well, yeah, I mean, definitely. I think there were a lot of stuff. The person who brought Barry to The Hague, to the conservatory, was a piano player, and he was sort of he's the one that sort of defined the genre for a huge part in the school, because he managed to sort of hire his network for a big part, at least. When I was there, it wasn't entirely his network anymore, but still. And he agreed with a lot of things Barry said, but he also had stuff where he thought, well, this is one way of doing it, but there are also other ways of doing it. So there were things that I think for me, because that was then before I started studying, the sort of the more general things that Barry taught about, practicing things through scales, learning arpeggios, exploring, applying things to songs sort of directly with exercises. Those kind of things really resonated with me. And I think in hindsight, this is something I sort of realized actually not so long ago, was that what I really loved about it was also that it was not just what notes to play, it was also how to play them. That his system really does that quite well, where a lot of other systems will just tell you sort of this scale goes with that chord, or, like it's going to be it's in a way a little bit more superficial. And here it's really sort of, okay, there's a tradition of how we make melodies, and there are some exercises that will help you make melodies like that. And I'll have words to describe certain types of melodies, certain melodies, and I'll show you how to make them sort of a general thing through the scale and work like that. And that whole approach was really from the beginning what I sort of took with me home and worked on. So that is something that really resonated with me. Something that I never really found a lot of use for, which is a controversial opinion sometimes when I say it, is actually all the 6 diminished scale and all those sort of chord functions, because that clashes with, it's a system and you can use it for some things, but I think as soon as you try to use it to describe all music, it doesn't really work for me. I think I hear music differently. So so I explored that and I use it for some things, but for me it's sort of an extra thing that you can put in a few places, so you can use it to come up with some cool ideas, and then it doesn't have to be everything you do. Yes.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So for you, the stuff relating to improvisation and playing through tunes was more the stuff that you took away from it, and the harmonic concept. That's interesting. Yeah, because when you watch YouTube and people talk about Barry Harris concepts, a lot of it seems to be more about the chordal stuff and less about the improv.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's true. Well, I mean, with Chris, I don't think that's the case actually. I think he also talks a lot about the melodic side of it, and and that was also what resonated. I think a part of what also really make that click for me was also that I'd already been trying to learn Parker solos. Actually, I'd already tried to learn some or checked out. I couldn't play them, but I checked out some Barry Harris solos before I went the first time because I'd never heard about him before. And then my teacher, actually my piano teacher, would give me like these tapes with him playing the Sonny Stitt, and I was trying to figure out some stuff. So I had some ideas about it, and that's maybe also a little bit later why I didn't feel like the 60 Minutes thing was so important to me, because he doesn't really play that on those old recordings. He hadn't invented that yet.
Oh, that's
so for me, it became something where all the Parker stuff and all the Joe Pass and all stuff, when I heard the exercises from Barry, it clicked, it fits together. And I was like, okay, this is actually helping me understand what is going on in this solo or this exercise or that bebop theme or something. And in that way, it became sort of immediately something I wanted to explore more. And I just didn't have that as much with the 60 Minutes stuff.
interesting. Yeah, interesting.
I think that's just me being overly practical with some things.
And so when you teach harmony, it's coming out of more, I don't know, conventional, like I don't know, how would you describe, like, do you have one thing I like about his system is just that that it is a system, and it's, every teacher, I guess, finds a way to put harmony into a system because you have to make it teachable. How would you describe the way that you teach harmony?
I think so. The way we were taught harmony in school, which I think I pretty much took that over, was really sort of like classical functional harmony.
Mm.
That's really coming out of that, and I think mostly that was for me that clicked because it helped me with ear training, and it helped me with singing stuff. And sort of again, it's like if I have music where I'm doing something and suddenly I find some sort of theory and it helps with that, then I'm just doing that. I'm not doing anything else that's like weird and complicated and I don't really understand it. At least I'm not doing that immediately, right?
Right.
So I think that's where that's coming from for me. That suddenly you explore something and you're told like, okay, well, you can hear how these voices move, and you can, if you listen to it like this, you can hear that chord sounds like that chord, and really you just need to realize that that's a minor subdominant, or that's whatever that is, and then you don't really have to care about what chord it is, because you can kind of play the same thing, and they're gonna be like a bass note different, and who cares? Right. So those kind of things, it's like very practical considerations, I guess. And that's also what I try to teach mostly. I have to admit that I actually try to not teach theory so much.
Right.
Because, I mean, I would imagine it's the same for you. I just realized that I spent years playing songs, like also playing jazz standards, and I could not analyze anything anyway. It's like, and then you play a few wrong notes and you're like, well, I don't know what this is, so it's probably Dorian for a minor chord or whatever, and it should be something else, and you can fix that later. I think it's more important that you just play some music, learn some songs, and then you can add all the details later. It's gonna be like one or two notes in the scale. Who really cares?
Yeah. When I was younger, I was such a kind of a fanboy for theory. I loved it. I loved the system of it and everything. And I remember early days of teaching, like I would teach at these music camps in the summertime and just write all this stuff on the chalkboard, all this theory stuff. And I barely think that way at all anymore. And when students ask me about it and they're super focused on it, yeah, I mean, kind of like what you're saying, I really just want them to just play. The theory, if you're fascinated by it as a study, I think that's fine. I mean, you could have a hobby, like make it your hobby, but I really don't think that it leads you towards making music any sooner, or even understanding a lot of the music any sooner. Really, I think more it's about listening and language and trying, just taking a risk and seeing what happens, right?
Yeah, very much. I mean, and that's also why, if I'm discussing stuff with like members of my Patreon or in my courses or something, then it's very often that one of the first things that comes throughout is like, what song do you know that it has this? What are you talking about? Because if you don't know any songs that has this, is it really worth it? Then it's yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because that's the whole point, is to be able to, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it is not really very, it doesn't have to be theory heavy. It's very much like a lot of ear training, but it's on the instrument, and you're required to be able to both play the song, know the chords of the song, and only the important ones, not all the fluff. And then you have to also apply whatever technique and figure that out. But it's very sort of, again, practical and useful in that way. And I think there are a lot of people who do that quite well around here, in sort of, and also where it, like Barry was of course from a certain period, so I think a lot of the music that came after him he wasn't a fan of, and he felt maybe that bebop should have continued, or the people that he whose playing he enjoyed did not get the attention that he would have wanted. But I think you can also see that a lot of people who learned a lot from Barry Harris and came from that are still able to bridge that, even if he didn't want to.
Chris was telling me, like, when he would go see Barry Harris play a concert in New York, the material would just be exactly what you said. He'd play a Bud Powell tune, he'd play a Charlie Parker tune, he'd play a Monk tune, and not even play his own tunes. It's just like, that's the rep. People came to hear bebop. This is the repertoire. But there must be people who studied with him who take the music to new places as well.
Yeah, but then it quickly, and well, that's where there's like a community, maybe almost to the degree of a religion. So you will have people that were like really in it, especially with the piano players, and then they would be sort of heralded as like the next thing coming. But then all of a sudden they would go into some quarter voicings and modal stuff, and then they were not a part of it anymore. I'm making it more crass than it is, but yeah, that did happen a few times, I know. And I don't know. I mean, at some point, it's like you can learn a lot from it. I think a lot of people also took a lot from it, and then because it's a system, you can sort of explore that for a bit, but you can also take other systems. You can also explore other styles of music and get that in there. And where maybe my impression was that Barry didn't have as much room for it, and he wasn't able to. He didn't feel like accepting that because he had his own thing, like you said. He was doing that tradition, that repertoire, and he wasn't really open to people all of a sudden playing something from McCoy Tyner or something. But at the same time, I mean, there are definitely, McCoy was also super traditional once in a while. So I think there were a lot of people who also just took this and went further with it, went into other things. But they kind of, I think, so that's my impression, that they were kind of forced to a little bit cut the connection a bit, and then they had to leave that tradition, sort of, even if they maybe didn't really.
Right. Do you have time for one more question?
Of course.
Okay. Chris said something when I spoke with him about, he said Barry used to say that the chordal stuff was great, like guitar players should be great at it. Like if you take the sixth diminished concept with drop two voicings, it's so guitaristic. Did you find, I know you said that's not the aspect of his teaching that you were most focused on, but did you find that as a guitar player the things he talked about translated well to the guitar, or did you have to kind of like translate and retranslate to make it make sense on the instrument?
I think, I mean, a certain sort of basic aspects of it fit really well because drop two voicings work well on guitar and also work well on piano. I think we don't have the flexibility to play stuff. So you run into a lot of things where I find that it's really nice to mess around with. It's like when you have all these inner voices moving and stuff like that, and that stuff is just nasty difficult on guitar. Let's just be honest, that's just horrible.
Right. Yeah.
So you have to be really practical about where that works and where you can get that to work. But it's just a lot of fun to mess around with at the same time, right? And in that way, those part of the system that's part of the systems where you, at least for me, and also actually, to be honest, I had the impression that was also how Barry worked with it a lot in the piano classes. That he would take some sort of exercise, and then he would just sort of play the exercise a little bit, and then this could work, and then he would sort of take a small bit of that exercise and put it into some sort of context and go like, it fits here.
In a tune.
Usually a tune, and otherwise like a specific type of chord, a specific turnaround. So usually it would be like you would go, that sounds great if I play this on I Thought About You or something. So I've seen that quite a few times that he would do it like that. So that's also a little bit how I try to mess around with it and how I like to use it. So you'll explore, and sometimes you just on guitar because guitar is guitar. Like you can do a lot of stuff. I play enough piano to sort of realize how it is to do it on piano, but on guitar there are just some stuff where you're moving voices and it's just not playable almost. And then you just leave that behind and you find the things that work, and then sometimes you find something that works, and then that's just really really great, you know. Then you can if you can fit it in somewhere and you go like, this will work for this, and then you have your thing there. And so there are certain aspects of it that I think are really, really work well for guitar. I believe you were talking to Thomas as well, Thomas Echols, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be talking to him a little later this month. Yeah.
I mean, because I think he's the one that I know that's checked out this, sort of went the furthest into that and has done the most with it. And some of the stuff is absolutely amazing what he does, you know. And so he will give you a much better answer than me. But I mean, so my practical way of hacking my way through this stuff is really just to sort of play some stuff and go like, okay, what works, what doesn't work, you know, like what can I get to work? But I have to say, I always live by, I think it's Schofield who said that in an interview, that guitar players tend to waste so much time trying to play all variations of everything, instead of just figuring out like where is it easy to play and then just use that all the time and not worry about all the other stuff that's super difficult to play.
Man, that's really true. That's really true.
I think we all have obsessed about learning every option of everything. And ironically, when I'd been to the first Barry Harris workshop and I came home and my brain was like twice as big at least, and then one of the first things I spent weeks on was trying. He has this exercise where he's playing like a scale in one octave, and he's told us to do that with dominant scales and all keys through the circle of fifths. And then I realized that how many ways I could do that on the neck, you know, because there are so many different octaves, and it's just like,
sure,
you know, the whole universe. So I was trying to do all of them, and I spent so much time doing that. But yeah, I mean, but it's and in the end, you start to realize that actually I'm just playing the same all the time. What's going on? You know?
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah. So that's definitely. But maybe that's also just a part of it. That at some point you just have to go down some rabbit holes and just really look for what's going on here. You know. Yeah.
When did you discover Barry Harris and his teachings?
I know exactly when, because I kind of remember it like one of those moments that's profound in your life. And it was 2010. It was the summer of 2010. Yeah. It was a profound moment. I had been, if I could say I'll share a bit about what it was like. Yeah, because so I had just finished my, like, not to throw degrees around, but I just finished my doctorate. I just finished my doctorate in classical music, in classical guitar. And I had really gone down a rabbit hole for a while in some theoretical spaces that were really exciting to me, and help for me was more about like helping me to understand how I want to engage with music creatively more than anything. And then and then Barry just popped up for me, and he happened to just the little bit of, in 2010 there wasn't nearly so much stuff on the internet, but the little bit that I saw was instantly right in line with some things that I kind of view as more cutting edge in a kind of tonal theoretical space, like newer ideas that are really important to me. Dmitri Timoshko is this guy who's really important to me. And Barry was just, I just saw it and I was like, this guy is doing this stuff that's very fascinating creatively to me, but he's doing it in such a exploratory and free, it's like he knows it better than anybody, and in the polyphonic space. And so I was instantly sold and was like, this is where I'm going to spend a lot of time for the next, and it turns out, 15 years of just utter, like, that's kind of become just all I want to spend my time on, is that space. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that really speaks to his depth and breadth that, somebody with a doctorate in music could find someone's concept, so compelling. That really speaks volumes about Barry's depth. That's incredible.
Yeah. And he was showing that stuff that he had been, I said, like, kind of, from my view, a little bit cutting edge ways of looking at conventional tonal spaces in theory, in music theory, in classical music theory. But Barry had been kind of thinking in that way for decades, and just exploring it. So but he just hadn't written a book. So no one really noticed in academia that he was doing those types of structures that were really fresh in 2010, like those ways of looking at things. It's fascinating to me, Yeah.
And how well did it translate to the guitar?
Instant joy. Translating it to the guitar instantly. What's funny is because, so there's a thing that people who follow my stuff will recognize these weird shapes I do, and those are taken from Dmitri Timoshko, but then I'm kind of mapping them differently in this Barry Harris space. But I had been looking at that before Barry came along, and I had been doing just simple things about, like, taking a diminished and moving notes down, that kind of stuff, to find these different little guys and all that stuff, and moving notes up. And I've been doing that and then moving around those things, what Barry Harris calls the brothers and sisters. I have been doing that a lot in my practice. So then Barry comes along and he's just doing beautiful creative stuff, and it was like instant joy. I was like, oh wow, you can take those things that I was looking at in like a more of a Wagnerian, like Messiaen, like kind of late post-tonal context, and instead being like, like these beautiful, like, oh, that's just cool tonal spaces that Barry's exploring in this way, and So, and then to guitar, so there's that, but then a very important thing is that, see, Barry always said we guitarists should be better at the scales of chords and things than other people. And what that means to me is that Barry, and this is the translation to guitar, Barry thought, I think, I'm just imagining, I'm conjecturing, but I'm sure he was aware that we could go, we could do that. And because we can do that, that means that we can do this. So we can go, and then we can go, and then we go. And I'm not really, see, I could do that in another key because I'm a guitarist. So I could be here. I could start here for starters or here for starters and do these movements. But also I could be here. I could be in any key. So I could be, whoops. And what I'm doing is I'm using a way of what I'm doing is I'm emphasizing a part of Barry's stuff that is very guitaristic, which is grips, Mm-hmm. And because we have grips, and because like I can do this, and this sounds nice over a dominant, then I can do this with a grip, and that's a little formula, and I just start to see like, oh, and that becomes, I can see connectivity without thinking of pitch necessarily, thinking of scale degree and shape and relationship. It takes the part that we think is kind of banal about the guitar sometimes. You know, it takes this. We're like, big deal. And it's like, oh, but yeah, like, big deal. It's the same thing. It's just instead of doing this, I'm doing a different grip, but in a formulaic way. And I know what it does, what it expresses. It's amazing. So that's taking Barry, when he's teaching pianos, he has to say, like, now think a minor third up, change the scale, pianist. Right. Like you play G minor 6 diminished, now play B flat minor 6 diminished. There's pretty things that could be done over the Stella by Starlight. But guitarists can be like, play a minor 6 chord, now play the same minor 6 family, but instead of having the 6 in the bass, have the 5th in the bass. Can you do that? Well, find the diminished, find it, but it's shapes that have we can do it and we don't have to think. It doesn't, it's amazing,
Yeah. I don't know if, sorry.
No, it's it.
I was going to say, I don't know if you know this pianist on YouTube, Nare Soul.
Oh, I love her. Yes, she's great. Yes.
She recently did a video where she studied guitar for 30 days.
I saw that. I love that video. Mm-hmm.
And one of her takeaways was related to what you're saying, is like, oh yeah, the guitar is really so, you hear things in relation to where you are. Like you play something and you learn that, oh yeah, that sound is here in relationship to where I am, rather than thinking specifically about, oh yeah, C sharp, and then that moves to this or that, which we can also do, but the guitar is so, well, you said it better than I can say.
I think, well, yeah, it's because what that's talking about, right, Adam? I think you're saying it brilliantly. I think it's about relationships, and because like in all kinds of musical activity, whether it's tonal or post-tonal, what starts to emerge, one thing that starts to emerge amongst many things, is intervallic relationships are incredibly important to even lay persons, So that's why we can hear major and minor chords, right? We can hear, if intervallic relationships are so important, then guitarists got game on that, because we have a physical shape for every intervallic relationship. And, and then it goes on, then if there are, in Barry's space, methods of manipulating sound through all kinds of spaces that are intervallically based, and that's really what Barry's doing, is something that is intervallically based more than anything, then we guitarists should be great at it, because we can grab those shapes, It's amazing. It's a beautiful, I teach classes where I'll have pianists, a bunch of pianists in, and I have classes where there's only guitarists, and with a guitarist, I can go a mile a minute through through counterpoint. I can go much faster with just guitarists, because I can say things that make sense to a guitarist that get you into a densely chromatic, like cool, hip sounding space, but thoughtfully, but thoughtlessly, right?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous to me.
A lot of people coming up in learning harmony think of diminished chords as either something to avoid or something they'll get into and out of as soon as possible. But Barry Harris's concept doesn't seem like that. And also, I was just watching your video on the flat 3 diminished, and you were talking about embraceable you. And it's like, okay, let's not run away from this. Let's just like make eye contact and now see like all of the possibilities. And I guess I don't really have a question here, but I'm just fascinated by, the idea that the diminished chord isn't something to run away from, but it's actually something to be, it's a powerful thing that you just have to learn to use.
I love, can I jump in on that? Because that's such a great thing. That's such a great thing you're saying, because it's so true. And what I like to say to people sometimes when this kind of thing comes up, if you are suggesting, like, say, Barry Harris stuff for like a college course, one of the first things you would want to say is normal music theory classes are diatonicism first, chromaticism second, chromaticism later. Chromaticism is harder, diatonicism is easier. Barry Harris's approach, in my view, and my way of teaching it for sure, but I think the way he taught it, I think it was his view too, and I have like good argument. I mean, I think that can be demonstrated. Chromaticism first. Chromaticism first. Diatonicism is a little bit more challenging. Not undoable, totally doable, but it feels like you're flexing a little bit more to sound really diatonic. If you want to sound chromatic, now not just diminished, just chromatic at all, in all the chromatics. Because turns out, and this is one of the things that, like, when I first found Barry, I was like, oh, he's living in the space that is kind of a fun, exciting space I've been reading in recent theoretical works. Turns out that chromatic harmony, be it like in Gershwin or like late 19th century romantic music like Brahms and stuff, so much of the time chromatic harmony it's all about filling in space between diatonic notes. And the way that those are found, if you're not just sliding everything in parallel, the way those are found is by harmonies that are related to a symmetrical structure. So if you have 4 notes, they are minor thirds apart because they're almost the diminished. What I mean is, like, it's about things that are almost symmetrical. Kind of like, it's poetic in a way, like how they say, like, you know, beauty is not just symmetry, but like, you know, people that are like, you know, quantifiably movie star handsome or pretty, they have little asymmetry kind of things to their face. Music, the dominant 7th chord is almost a diminished. The minor 6th chord, aka half diminished 7th, is almost a diminished. The major 6 is almost a diminished. The dominant 7 flat 5 is almost a diminished. And when we lean into that in a way that is counterintuitive for a person that's used to normal ways of thinking about music, it unfolds amazing things. So I'll be referencing the diminished, but there will be no diminished sound in the moment. You know, but I'll be playing in a way that I could easily slip into diminished, but I don't. I'm in this other sound space, but I am what I would call exploiting the nearness of the harmonies to the diminished and exploring that. And it's amazing. And so it is very chromatic. It's very don't run from diminished. Yes. And it's very like in that Embraceable You and that flat 3 diminished. I was just teaching a class this morning. So you're like hitting exactly what I was just doing. We were doing the beginning of Stella by Starlight. And you could view that as a flat 3 diminished, the one way of viewing that. And if so, then the flat 3 diminished, you can play through combining the notes of one diminished and another. You can play a dominant 7 flat 5. So you could be like in Embraceable You or Stella, it's the same. It's like this. That's a dominant 7 flat 5. Look at that. So see, that's the diminished scale. Right? What about this one? See, now watch this. There's the diminished scale. What about this? Watch this, I gotta pick the right one. All right, so. Whoa, but then look. See, that's a major 6, but I got the root. And see, the root is a borrowed note. All I do is I take 2 notes from the other diminished. This is my main diminished. See? But I just take some of those and some of this. Isn't that wild?
That is very wild.
And then you know, this is pretty stuff. And same thing in Embraceable You. So watch, I'll do that same harmony. Or all those. See? You could go, I could do this. Watch this. I could go, what? Whoops. There we go. See? Whoops.
Wow. So those are major 6ths alternating with. Wait, what are those 2 shapes?
I'm doing, that's a major 6 shape because I know that the diminished, if you take diminished and you flatten, and the diminished scale is made of a diminished plus a diminished, right?
Right. Yep.
And the one that's my main one is the upper one. That's the one that is the flat 3 diminished. okay? Because it expresses 4 different dominants, and that's kind of how the voice leading works out. So if you try to do, in other words, if you went Embraceable You and you went, and then you did this, but you didn't do the correct diminished scale, you wouldn't be able to do this melody. It wouldn't sound right. You got to be the one that is, when people say whole half, you gotta think like that. So if that's the case, so this is one diminished, this is the other. So what I'm doing is I'm gonna take this note, put it from the other, and I'm gonna take this note, put it from the other, and now I've flattened 2 notes, which creates a major 6 if you do it right. So I could do, so in other words, another way to think about it is, if I make this note that goes to here, if I make it the root, or I make it the 6 of a major 6, I'm playing in the scale. If I make it the 3rd or the 5th, it's not right, because the 3rd and the 5th are the ones that are in the top diminished.
I see.
So I can go like, that's the 6th, and then I can do that again, and whoops, like that.
Yeah.
It's the same scale. It's always going to work out. So this is the diminished scale. Then this, whoops, minor 3rds up, Tom. See? That's the diminished scale.
Right.
Isn't that a trip?
That's a trip. And then just, seeing you move it like that again, brings home that, as guitarists, we have
Case in point, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Case in point. It's so that's like, doesn't even sound like a diminished half the time, and that's when you're playing that is the diminished.
Yeah, right. Right.
Like when you're playing the other scales that have a diminished, you can really get sneaky, and it'll sound all kinds of ways. So it's both embrace the diminished and also everything is the diminished.
Everything is the diminished. Right. Wow.
In a chromatic mind frame. That's a chromatic mind frame. That's
right.
That's what that is.
Huh.
Yeah. I hope I'm not going too nutty. I always go. I can't help myself. We gotta go in there if we're talking. If we're gonna talk about it, we got. Yeah. It's so fun. It's so fun to talk about.
Yeah. No need to filter anything. Yeah. It's great. It's great. I want to ask you about a couple of concepts that I've heard you talk about on your YouTube channel with relation to Barry Harris concepts and your framework for them. And so one is using shells. So instead of everything being 4-part harmony, you've got some smaller iterations. Could you talk about that, or just give an example of that?
Love that. Yeah. So say if I was playing that same diminished scale thing. Diminished scale is an easy place to see it, actually, because now I know that that's a full 7-note chord. Now I'm doing something on purpose right now. I'm playing 2nd string 1 note. This is guitaristic to do this. 2nd string 1 note, 2 notes on the 3rd string, and 1 note on the 4th string. That's going to make it so that I can show what a shell chord is in my view right now. Like normally people say shell and it's like a particular voicing, but the concept is the same. I'm hollowing it out like a shell. I'm going to remove one of these 2 notes. So I'm going to go, this is the full 4-note chord. That's a fully diminished 7th chord, but I'm going to go, or,
Oh.
You see? Yeah. So now look, if I were going, I can use that same shape, or I can go, so what I'm doing is I could go like this. This is going to be difficult for me. So I'm going to go, okay, I did it, great. So now, instead of that, or, so this is high shell because I took of the 2 notes, I took the high note. And this is very guitaristic, because now, whoops, I got to do the same scale. Things like that, things like this. So now I can go, watch. I can move those around with the bass or with the top. So I can go like, so I'm going to do that, but with a little shell down below. So how do I do this? So I could go, see, one way of thinking about that is I moved down with shells. You see, they're very malleable. You can play. See, I could go like, like stuff like that, super hip. And so shell chords, and then you have beautiful things where like less is more. Like, say if I'm playing in the key of C major, and I take A minor, and now I'm on D minor 7, I'm doing a turnaround, and then G7. So now when I get to the turnaround, to the tooth chord, this is F major 6. That's just shell chords manipulating. Or like, watch this. I just moved it down. Less is more. I got 3 notes of a full thing. And that sounds nice over a dominant 7th. I just take 3 of them. It's a less is more approach is sometimes counterintuitive, but so I like shells for 3 reasons. I like shells because they're inside all kinds of things. So they're inside a drop 2. You can think of a shell as the top end of a drop 2. See, C major 6. Right there on top is a low shell. C major 6. Right underneath is a high shell. See? In a drop 3. Drop 3, there's my shell. So see, I can do stuff. I could see stuff, and that's inside of stuff. I could see things inside of things. And when you get to like weird substitution logics and stuff like, this type of sound and stuff, you can really, and then I'll resolve out. They're very useful. And then I love so I like that they fit within stuff. I like that they're easy to play for guitarists. I can embellish them with things like this. It's easy to like do extra notes. And then lastly is that I love the quality of a sound being revealed to me over time. So instead of just hitting all the notes at once, personally, in my aesthetics, I love stuff like this. I love, you see, that gets revealed. And so the little shells are nice for that, because it's like, it gets revealed as you go through the cycle of pitches. Isn't it nice? But in scales of chords, they're really useful because you're just going around, in that scale of chords. Barry Harris stuff.
Where in your teachings, if somebody wanted to learn more about shells, is that in Foundations 1 or Foundations 2, or where can somebody find more about the shells if they were curious? Right.
It's great. The number one place is, Foundations 1 gives a grounding. There's a little bit of touching on shells, just barely in the assignment. There's an assignment in there that I have these assignments towards the end, and there's one on relative motion or on borrowing. I think it's on borrowing. Yeah. And there's shell chords in there, but where I hit shell chords really, really clearly the best is in my Patreon at the tier that gets people my full coursework, which is like my, if I may, mention this, it's the collaborator tier, and it's where I post things on a weekly basis, and there's units of learning, and once a person gets into unit 2, like I have emphasis in different units, and unit 2 is after a little bit of lessons, but then it's like shell chords all the way, baby. It's like that unit 2, and emphasis of unit 2 is getting our minds around shell chords. So I have all these little exercises in there. So that's the number one place, because then you can't get through unit 2 without feeling good about shell chords. You're going to be doing them all over the place, And that's why everybody on my in my crew, as I call them, like learning from me in that space, they're like would do an impersonation of being like, here's Tom, shell chords, like love them. They're so nice. Funny.
Do you have time for me to ask you about one other thing?
Sure, man. Yeah.
Okay.
This is such a treat. I love talking with you about this stuff. It's so fun, Adam. Yeah.
Well, another thing that I've heard you mention on your YouTube channel is this ugliest duckling sound, and I wasn't sure I got it. So since I get to have a little one-on-one time with you, I thought I'd ask, if you could explain what the ugliest duckling is.
Absolutely. So this brings us back to the diminished once again, which is the center of things. Okay. So we'll take, because I have a nice musical example for it in the key of, what does that go to? Does it go to G minor? Let's see. It's, it goes to G minor. So this is from the song Once in a While. Ugliest Duckling's really useful in that song and other places. So I'll show you what it is now. So if I were playing D dominant seventh, okay, going to G. Here's D dominant seventh. It comes from this diminished. I raise that root, right? Now, let's talk about the minor 6 and the 5. That's I raise the root one more and I get A minor 6. We call it the minor 6 and the 5 because it's the 5th of D. I got a minor 6 on the 5th of D. But really the reason why I use it is because it's almost D. D is almost the diminished. A minor 6 is almost the diminished in the same way. That's why. They live across the street from each other is what I say to my students. They're like friends that cross the street from each other, grew up. They're best friends. No minor 6 or dominant 7 flat 5 have as close a relationship as that. They are like the fox and the hound, or maybe not fox and hound because that ends badly, but frog and toad. They are frog and toad. Okay, there we go. Other animals. And so so that's the minor 6 and the 5. So that's a label for that. Now, if I instead of going, so I go up from D7. D7 is still my dominant. I'm still going to go to G. Is my guitar correct volume? Not too loud? Okay. So now I'm going to take this diminished. I'm going to lower the 4th string, and I get what's called the tritone sub of D. That's A flat 7. I'm still thinking D, so this is just a chromatic, it's going to be like that kind of sound. So now if I go up to find its frog and toad, so this is frog, here's toad, and that's its minor 6 and 5. That's what we call the tritones minor. So now we got 2 labels of the 4 minor 6 brothers and sisters, because there are 4, because we can raise any note from the diminished. Minor 6 and the 5 in relation to D. Not in relation to other things, but in relation to D. A minor 6 is minor 6 and the 5. E flat minor 6 is tritones minor. All right. We got 2 more. Here's a nice one. I scoot the 2nd string up. I'm saving Ugliest Duckling for last. This one is the minor 4. The reason why is because it's C minor 6, and that pulls nicely to G major, just like D does. Well, not just like, but it does, right? So we get, right? You get that beautiful, that beautiful sound. You get the, pretty sound. So that's minor 4. So that adds a pull to G. So we love that. By the same, you could start to get into a criticism of negative harmony stuff if you ever looked at that stuff, because this is another way another way of looking at things that touches on things that people are in negative harmony are into. But I like this way. So now we got our last one. So now I'm going to raise the 3rd string. Now I got a minor 6 that's pretty funky. This minor 6 check it out. The first minor 6 I played, the minor 6 and the 5, has the tritone that resolves to G. Beautiful. The second one, E flat minor 6, has the tritone that resolves to G.
Yeah.
The third one I played, minor 4, does not. It has this one. That's a different tritone. It resolves differently to G when you move it, right? Yeah. See, this goes down to the 5th. This one goes up to the 3rd. And the normal tritone resolving to G goes to the 3rd and the root. Right. You get that?
Okay. Yeah.
So now look at this weird one. Now we don't have the original tritone, but look at what we have. That minor 6. So we have so this one, the minor 4 has right? And this one also has that, but look at this weird note. That's wrong in D because that's a major 7th.
So this is F sharp minor 6. That's what that is.
Yeah, it's F sharp minor 6. F sharp minor 6 has a C sharp in there, and that is just wrong on a D7 unless you play it right. So for example, playing the tritone. So I'm playing the tritone. This is A flat 7. So it's like I'm thinking E flat minor 6, aka A flat 7. Pretty sound of the tritone sub. But look at this in the tritone sub. If I play that scale, A flat 7. Oops, major 7th on that 4th scale degree. Sometimes people avoid that by changing it to what they call Lydian dominant, but you can also do. There's a beautiful song by Astor Piazzolla that goes like this. Now listen to what happened there. It was. See all that sound, and this was. So I went. That's a major 7th. That's what it said. It said major 7th, but it's just treated as a passing tone.
Right.
And because I think I said earlier, chromaticism is largely about filling in space between notes.
Right.
So if I'm stuck always thinking this note has to live in this chord, I miss out on a lot. If I'm not willing to see. It's pretty. So now the Ugliest Duckling has that sound. So now the thing is, it's hard to make that work in like a normal 2/5, like. But you can kind of. Well, sorry, I'm doing weird. G major. So. See.
Yeah.
A little bit hard, but if the best place to use Ugliest Duckling, where I love it, is if actually instead of going to G major, I'm going to G minor, but G minor 7, which happens in songs all the time. So Body and Soul. That's a different key. So once in a while, beautiful song goes, once in a while, will you try to give one more thought to me? So right there at that part, that is going, it's a dominant. It's, if I slowed it down, it's like. It's like a really slow, that's a 2/5. But because it's going to this, it sounds nice because you know what the Ugliest Duckling is? First off, you know what G minor 7 is B flat major 6.
Right. Okay.
Now, if I were going to B flat major 6, F7 would be my dominant.
Yes.
Tritones minor of F7 is the Ugliest Duckling in relation to G. It's F sharp minor 6. Now that's a whole lot of crazy talk, but listen to the sound. Watch. So I'm going to go once in a while. Now here I'm on E flat major 6. I'm going to do a pretty move just because it's fun. Now watch. This is a 2/5 to G. This is the flat minor 7 flat 5, right? A minor 7 flat 5, aka C minor 6.
Yeah.
This would be the dominant going to G. This is like tritones minor of D. Yeah, it was like that. So that's E flat minor 6. But then I'm going to go from that. Doesn't that sound beautiful?
Yeah.
And that is doing the exact same thing I did on a tritone sub scale. I'm viewing it, so I'm not treating it as a chord. See, the thing is, the more you learn this Barry Harris stuff, chords don't exist anymore for you. You're just using them as way stations. And so you go, why not this? You start to see all these things, why not? And you'll hear, so you can hear Barry Harris doing that on his recording of that song on Last Time I Saw Paris. He does that sound. You'll hear him go like, he'll go. He goes, he'll go like this. Like that.
Oh, wow.
So that's brothers and sisters. That's the ugliest duckling. So I use the ugliest duckling in two places mainly, in that kind of situation and also in a minor 2/5, because the ugliest duckling in minor 2/5 is just a half step below your 1 chord. See, F sharp minor 6. If I was in this, so I could go. It's like we overthink it, but it's important to, the way I was overthinking it just now is really the framing underneath it. You see, that's like a space. The thing is, I can bring myself to that space, and then I'm real comfortable with it now because I've done this a bunch. But originally I would be like, I would go through these steps and I'd get my ear around it and make it work. And then a few days later, I'd be like, I can't hear it right anymore. I can't make it happen for myself. And I'd go through the steps again and make it work. And then I could do it, you know, and so those steps I did was partially to help, you know, like I think I started out by doing one example real quick, but then you got to work through it. But that's the ugliest duckling. And so it's like I have a place for all those. It's minor 6 on the 5, tritones minor, minor 4, ugliest duckling. They all have a flavor and a function within a tonal situation. Wild, huh?
It is. It's wild and yet makes so much sense. You know? It's, wow.
It's so fun. It's so fun. It's, you know, it really, the thing is, if I could say something about just Barry and how important he is to me in my life, because he really, I think, the reason why I remember first encountering Barry is because it changed my life utterly, like finding Barry's stuff. And there's my life before knowing Barry Harris stuff, and there's life after, and they are two different things. And one of the most important things, so I like that you ask about small things and ask about that, because like asking about shell chords, Barry used to always say, we got to look at little things. We got to look at little things. And when you think about it, no matter how big you get, when you start connecting things, it's the small things, it's the small little junctures that are between things, right? And what Barry gives us that to me is the more valuable than anything, and me and my friend Chris Parks, we talk about this sometimes and how grateful we are for it, is that he gave us a method for exploring process and exploring nuance that isn't closed. It's a finite amount of materials that then are kaleidoscopic in their combinations, but it gives us a method like all that I unpacked from The Ugliest Duckling. Barry never said any of that, you know, but it follows directly out of what he gave me, you know? And there are so many things like that follow directly out. So it's a method for being kind of rational and sane with yourself, not insane and sane with yourself. You got to be careful there. Rational and sane with yourself while exploring kind of limitless, like wild artistic, you know, possibilities. And that is incredibly comforting and energizing, galvanizing, you know, it's amazing. You know, and I think that's the most, if I had to pick, there's all kinds of things that are special about what Barry gave, but I think he gave something that is a door that is showing you a space into what's kind of evident. It's like showable and evident. It's not like just, I want to sound like somebody. It doesn't actually have a sound. It could go anywhere, but it's a method of little ways of investigating. And that's what's so special about it to me more than anything, you know?